All right, folks, how's it going? Ordinary Income back today. We have a pretty jam-packed day of news, as earlier this morning at around 7:30 a.m. Central Time, the inflation data for July 2022 came out, and there have been a swath of opinions, analysis, topics being covered all over Twitter and the news, and there's a lot to break down. So I'm going to try and get to all the most important stuff, and at the end kind of mention to you what does it all mean, and kind of give a little bit of a breakdown of what's happening and what might be happening next. So we're gonna get right into it. I don't want to waste too much time. And the headlines that caught the news this morning was that the CPI rate for July 2022 went to 8.5% as opposed to June 2022 was at 9.1%. So a lot to break down. The results of this was that we saw the stock market have a pretty decent rally in the morning for two reasons. One is that just that initial view that you have 9.1% last month. This month it's a little bit lower. So it was given the false idea that maybe inflation is cooling off. The other idea was regarding estimates. I believe somewhere in the article, it might not even mention it, but Wall Street estimated the inflation rate to be at 8.7%. And for it to be missing that, meaning that it was lower, prices went down lower than what expected, it's kind of a better signal. I did make a video, I think, months ago talking about estimates. I don't really care for them. I don't bother to even worry about them, but they do cause reactions because they're seen as a benchmark and whatnot. But I'll leave that for another day. The idea is relating this inflation rate. So what does it mean overall? Right now, the thing that's completely concrete is that if you looked at prices exactly a year ago at the end of July 2021, and you looked at prices at July 2022, you would notice that they're on average 8.5% higher than what they were a year ago. That is an average based on the CPI, based on how they calculate it. Is it true? There's been arguments not, because you can make the case that the real inflation rate is probably in the 12 to 16% rate based on if you were to actually look at how expensive things have gone. But we're using the rate that is reported in the news and the Federal Reserve and all that. This number is still ridiculously high. It's pretty stupidly high. And if you're wondering how stupidly high is it, we can take a look in particular. So if we were just to go back to the year 2000, give me 20 years of data, you'll see that where we are right now on the right side, these bars are ridiculously higher than even in the past 10 years. I think the highest we'd gone to was 3.82%. We're shattering those. So if we go a little bit closer, even just the start of 2021, if any of you remember last year when we were touching like the fives, that was a big deal because that's a huge inflation rate. And again, the Federal Reserve's target has been 2% average. We're destroying that average. But last year alone, the 5% was pretty high. Now we're seeing, we've been seeing nothing so far in 2022. It hasn't even gone below 7. And to have a 7.5% inflation rate is kind of, that's ridiculous as well. Again, unless you guys are getting absurdly high bonuses, it's pretty tough to keep up with everything that's happening in the price realm. So we're still having high numbers. The idea that we had a lower number than June has been kind of misconstrued. And there was one tweet here I saw from Mark Moss that said that CPI dropping from 9.1 to 8.5% doesn't mean the prices are actually going down. It just means they're still going up just a little bit slower. And we can do a little bit of an Excel example to illustrate that. So let's say in June 2021, you bought a bagel for $10. With inflation at that 9.1%, your bagel went to $10.91. Now you can say that if you bought a bagel for $10 in July 2021 with the inflation rate at 8.5%, you had $10.85. And it looks like it's going down. You have June to July, $10.91, $10.85, 6 cents lower. Here's the thing though. Month to month though, something that isn't tracked as much but is there, these prices have changed as well. So most likely what happened was that you had $10 in June 2021. That went to probably $10.01 in July 2021. And now what you're seeing is that prices are still going up. They're not going up as crazy as they have been. It's only a 5-cent difference in this example, but we're still seeing elevated prices because that 8.5% is what everything was at the end of July 2021. And what everything was at the end of July 2021 includes all the price increases that happened throughout that year. And so while inflation here is numerically going down, and we can see a little bit of a drop here, not exactly falling off a cliff, but it is dropping. It's not saying that last month your prices were, 0.06% cheaper. It still means that according to last year, your prices are still higher. And the only time prices will ever decrease is when you have a negative inflation print, then meaning that the rate of change is going lower and that your prices from last year were more expensive than they are right now. But there's a lot of games being played with math and derivatives. Inflation itself is the viewpoint of the rate of change of prices from now to a year back. Viewing the rate of change between inflation or rates is like the double derivative, I guess I could say, the double rate of change. Now you're looking at the velocity of how things are going. And if this velocity stays, maybe it could go lower and all that, but again, as long as the number is above zero, things are getting more expensive. When the number goes below zero, then we're getting things cheaper. And so as of right now, we're still seeing pretty high, this is stupidly high inflation. Again, I'll show you back, like decades back, 59 January. The only time we've even had anything close to this was in the 80s when we went into a recession, which is another topic to have. But we're still seeing a high. So how bad is it though? Here's another chart I found on Twitter that kind of illustrates this point, that even if we were to print zeros for the rest of the year, what we would see is that the overall inflation at the end of 2022 would be 6.3%. What that means is if we had no price increases for the rest of the year, anything like that, the overall increases of prices for the year 2022 would be at 6.3%, meaning if you were to buy something in December 2022, it was 6.3% higher than it was at January 2022. And that's probably like some of the highest that we've had over the amounts of years. And that's to say that if suppliers and producers are saying we're not going to increase any prices for the remainder of the year as well. So if we have month over month prints now of 0.000, you're still seeing an overall increase of this much, 6.3% year round here by the end of 2022. So unless you got a bonus that's 7% and we're banking that we're going to get 0% inflation readings for the next couple months, you're having a tough time. And those are probably impossible. I don't even want to say improbable, they are impossible. We will not be getting zero. So unless you're getting bonuses or pay raises that are in the double digits, you're having a hard time keeping up. And I am as well, by the way. And so the last thing I wanted to mention here as we briefly take a tour here is a couple of takes that have been going around Twitter and the news of what people are saying. Here from President Secretary, I believe she is, that we just received news that our economy had 0% inflation in July. The price of some things went up, the price of other things like gas, clothing, and more dropped. What she is referencing is that month over month, at the end of June 2022 to the end of July 2021, 31 days, there was no price increases. There's other political things going on with gas and with all that, but she's saying that prices stayed the same as they were for 31-day period. What the problem with that is that they were already stupidly high at the end of June 2022. And so with them staying at zero, great. We didn't have anything increase, but we've had zero relief as well. On top of zero relief, we've actually had layoffs. So now people are losing their jobs and still trying to afford high prices. The point being that it was already tough keeping up with costs at the end of June 2022. You didn't do anything to relieve that pressure. Them staying where they are doesn't really afford, obviously it's better than if prices were to go up, but they're already at a point where it's like, man, this is tough to handle. Gas to be at the price it is right now, even if gas drops 20 cents, that's still like a stupidly high amount compared to what we've been before. Clothing, food, all that. We've got many problems on the horizon as well to worry about with prices, but to just keep them at bay, it's not good enough is what I'm trying to make the point of. So that's the overall idea. A lot of takes happening. Try and not read too much into anything. It's always going to come down to a math equation here, always going to come down to a mathematical problem. And it has to do a lot with if you can look at rates of change and all that. And if you can't, I'll break it down for you. The idea is we're still seeing a highly elevated readings on, you can see like these readings are absurd. Like I said, the 5% were high, and that's true because 5% hadn't been hit since barely, it had been touched in the great financial crisis. And before then, 5% were only happening in recessions. It looks like smaller recessions as well. Now that we're at 8%, it's still, it's I keep saying it's absurd because it is. I can't fathom it either. If you have a six-figure income, they used to say that if you're making $100,000 a year, you're living pretty comfortably. That's not the case anymore. We could bring it down. If you're making $100,000, you're probably at being able to save some money, but it's nowhere near the comfort of what had been talked about. And there's many people that aren't making that. They're making below that. And it's been a tough time to keep up. So I'm not a huge fan. Sometimes when I see these headlines, I try and break them down. What does it mean for all of you? It means that prices are not going up as much as they were, but they're still going up for the most part as opposed to a year ago. And if you're not getting a bonus that matches it, which most of us are not, because that's the reality of it, what can you do? As I've said before, there's got to be ways that you have to look for to bring more value to your company, to be able to make more money. It could be the point where you need to start, maybe work another job, doing a gig economy type of thing like DoorDash and Uber Eats. I did DoorDash and Uber Eats a year ago, by the way. And if you follow if you go to the right neighborhoods at the right times, you can make a decent amount of money in your free time as well. And from what I've seen in my area, there's been a lot less of that because of the price of gas. So if you're able to obviously make a decent amount after gas costs and all that, it's a good way to add extra dollars to your bank account. Or you can just continue finding ways to gain credibility, gain value at your job. It could be certifications, it could be learning new skills, it could be taking on different projects and all that, showing that you're valuable and you can bring that up and hopefully have great conversations at the end of the year to get a bonus. Or if you can't get a bonus, you're able to find a new job with the new skills and the new work you've been providing. That's unfortunately the best I can think of right now. Even parking your money in the stock market has been tough because I believe it's gone down 13% this year alone. So it's tricky. Everyone's suffering outside of, I think, like the upper class here, but everyone's suffering. And a lot of these takes that I see is in relation to the fact that we have midterm elections coming up in November. I'll be making plenty of videos probably talking about that. And so narratives are going to be thrown your way, ideas, storylines, and all that. It's going to be tricky. I'll always be trying to break down whatever stories come our way, whatever things I see that are kind of janky, like this here, breaking down, reading between the lines here, but just keep an eye on, be very careful of the news you're kind of ingesting, the things you're hearing, because obviously there's going to be things that are thrown out to sway you to go one way or another. But a lot of these, there's a lot of things going around because when you have record high inflation that's not slowing down, it's not a great look to go into an election cycle. So keep that in mind. My point being is that another thing that you can do is to obviously change who you vote for if you'd like to, or vote for the same people. I don't really care who you vote for, but keep in mind whom you vote for now has shown that it does have an impact on certain policies, and people have taken that out on their senators, congressmen and women, and politicians. So that November election is going to be very important. I urge you all to vote. I urge you all to, come to your own conclusions with the right research you're doing. So with that being said, inflation's hot. It's tough. I hope I was able to break down a couple topics. If there's something you're confused about, you can always leave a comment below in the video, and you can shoot me a message on Twitter. I'll leave it in the link description of my Twitter handle. And yeah, ask any questions you all like. And if there's topics you all want to see for videos, let me know. I'll be very happy to break it all down. That's all for today, folks. Hopefully it gets better. Hopefully you're able to make more money to sustain this somehow. And I'll catch you all back later.